Welcome back to The Interview. I'm Gene Marrano. Our guest is Roanoke City Manager Chris Morrill, and we sort of gave your book a little bit of a short shrift there. You were mentioning some of the inequities in neighborhoods, and that's something, Chris, that has been a criticism here.
Correct.
Certain areas of the city, northwest Roanoke, for example, heavily African-American minority neighborhood, that there has been some inequities over the years as far as services and amenities, things like that. Is that something that you've seen or that you've heard about from people, and is that something you can correct over a period of time?
Yeah, I have heard people say that, and I think, the city in its planning has actually recognized that in its recreation planning, that there's underserved areas. So I think what you do is first you identify it, and then with limited resources, you put together a plan how over time you can address those inequities, both in infrastructure and then if there's social issues with education and other things too. I think it's critical for the health of the whole community and the region outside of Roanoke.
How challenging, though, is it doing some of this stuff, Chris, in today's economic climate where basically, I mean, the economy is so slow and basically city governments thrive on tax revenue and money they get from the state, the federal, and if that money, you're not getting that money. How challenging is it right now? You've been in the budget business a long time. The climate today, how challenging is it compared to past budget cycles and things you've been in?
Oh, yeah, more challenging than I've ever seen in my 25 years here, and probably people who've been in the business for 50 years would say that. I think what it does is it really forces you to get down to your core community values, figure out what your core priorities are, and then you fund those. So you talk about what you can fund, not what you can't fund, and you have to make some tough decisions. Where, like you as an individual, if you're having financial problems, you don't do across the board cut. You pay your mortgage and you cancel your Netflix subscription.
Right.
We get to follow that model here. And there will be some very important services that we may have to get out of to focus more on the core, and maybe some new services we need to get into because we know that the data will show that they'll be more productive.
And I guess part of the challenge there is just really making that understood to citizens, why you're doing this, why you're having to do this.
Exactly. It's really communicating all that and helping people understand it. It's a huge task, but I get the sense, this community is ready to go through that.
Right. And this is also a community that does not cotton very much to tax hikes or the idea of tax hikes. It's a very conservative community as far as that goes. And we've both probably lived in higher tax communities.
We have, that's right.
So I guess that is something that you really have to sharpen the knife and make people understand what's going on.
Exactly, and we got to look at our competition, other communities in the region and in the state, and are our tax rates in line? If they're not, it can hurt us competitively, and we got to think long term with that.
I wanted to go a little bit into your background. You have a very interesting background, including a stint in the Peace Corps in the early 90s, where you advised a city in Ukraine on finance and management issues. Talk about that experience and what you took away from it.
Yeah, my wife and I, in '92, were part of the first 50 volunteers into the former Soviet Union. So we arrived before United States Agency for International Development, most of the embassy. Fascinating experience, and one thing, it puts in perspective all the resources that we have here. Worked with some good people, but their challenges were enormous. But
they were coming out of a central planned economy, for one thing.
That's right, and Ukraine was just becoming independent, didn't know how to run itself, had no sense of local government, everything centrally controlled. And really, I think for countries to be successful, and I think we're really realizing that in international development, you need strong local governments to provide those core services directly to citizens.
Right.
So helped the city of Lviv, a city of about 1 million people, to start planning that, worked on housing privatization, some other things. Good learning experience for me in dealing with some really insurmountable challenges and how you just get it a bite at a time.
I guess you were also an advisor to the South African National Treasury, where you helped local government with finance and budget issues and that experience. And were there lessons there that you learned perhaps that you could transfer to Savannah or Roanoke even?
Yeah, it was interesting, and to contrast that with Ukraine, South Africa has probably one of the best constitutions in the world in terms of recognizing the importance of local government. So they actually hired me as a practitioner to help them develop their local government finance system from scratch, realizing that if they wanted to get water, sewer, electricity, education out to the 80% of the population, which wasn't served under apartheid, you don't do that centrally, you do that through strong local governments. And I worked with folks who had spent time in prison or had been exiled, really inspirational about the role government can play positively in moving a country forward.
And you also completed a 3-year fellowship in a national leadership program where you studied conflict resolution and community building in places like Peru, China, South Africa, and Northern Ireland. Are there common threads in the way people want to build communities or resolve conflicts? Is that something you've seen?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to identifying those key people in the community. They're often not the identified leaders or the folks at the bottom, but who can cross boundaries, bring people together. It's about collaboration, about listening, understanding, especially in areas of high conflict. It's really about how do you transform the conflict into something positive. And I think those are translatable to just day-to-day issues that we're dealing with, or some of the major issues we're trying to deal with here in terms of development and other areas.
You know, Roanoke has made big pushes, Chris, in recent years to brand itself as an arts-friendly city and also an outdoor city. Greenways and now the outdoor branding campaign you mentioned before with Roanoke Regional Partnership. How much does quality of life factor in, do you think, when people decide where they want to live or when businesses want to relocate?
Tremendous. I can tell my own experience. When I got the call about Roanoke, didn't know much about it. My wife, who's a research librarian, got online, researched it, started thinking, wow, this looks like a pretty good place. My first visit here to walk around the downtown, I walked on the Greenway, went up to Mill Mountain. I mean, that was what, convinced me this is the place I want to live. So it's the people, but you got to have the amenities too. I think this is where people will choose to live when they can live anywhere.
It's good to have a research librarian in the family. Huh?
It is. She helps me with a bunch of things, yeah.
Roanoke has lost population steadily over the years, or is kind of flat now. What makes people come back? Is it the quality of life? Is it the schools? Is that a major factor, Chris?
I think schools absolutely is, and I know for us, education was something we looked at, and we're pleased with the schools here. Our children actually started in schools here and did well. And I think as people are going to want more of that urban experience like we can give them in downtown, in our neighborhoods, when they know that you can have those amenities, but then quickly get out to nature with hiking and canoeing, whatever else it may be.
Sure.
I think that's what's going to bring people back in, when we can show them that quality of life experience they can have here, that you can have it all. Great restaurants, great entertainment, and great nature right there. Other cities have captured that, like Portland and Chattanooga, and I think we're well positioned to do that. Just got to get the word out. Right,
exactly. A couple of minutes left. A couple of quick things. The closure of the City Market building, which is coming up the month that this will air. How important is it to turn that around quickly? And are you hoping that a lot of the current tenants will consider coming back?
Yeah, it's critical. That few cities have city markets like that left. I mean, it is an incredible asset to this community. Right now, I don't think it's where it should be. So this historic renovation, I think, will be critical. I think we have a good local contractor who's doing it. We've stressed with them how critical it is. We're going to have a website, staff down there. I think communication will be important through that. So we're looking, next May when we open the doors. I think some of the current vendors will come back. Some may choose not to, and we have a good foundation board that will be managing that. And I think our goal, if we can connect that more to the farmers market, it will be stronger connection to the community.
About a minute left. A lot of things going on in Roanoke. The new Virginia Tech Carilion Medical School, the Research Center, that whole end of South Jefferson. How optimistic are you about the future of the city and where Roanoke is going at this point?
I'm extremely optimistic, and I think also there are lots of people here who are so generous with their money, time, and talent. This is a place where you can feel it bubbling. I mean, I think our future is going to be really bright.
Real quickly, did you get any good advice from Darlene Bertram, your predecessor, before she left?
Darlene was great. She sat down with me and showed me the key issues she was working on so I could help with that transition. Okay. Very, very, very good to work with.
Right. Roanoke City Manager Chris Morrill, thank you very much for coming on the interview. Appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy.
Yep. Thank you, Gene.
All right. This is The Interview. I'm Gene Marrano. We'll be right back.